Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I am joined with Lucie André. We're here to talk about her debut novel that she has just written and is being released, and lots of other things about the New York City dance scene in the 1990s. So we're going back a little bit. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I'm happy to have Lucie here. So welcome, Lucie, to Dance Talk.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I always like to start with how my guests get into the dance world. And I understand your entree into the dance world might be a little different than most of my guests. And the fact that your book is a novel as opposed to a biography, an autobiography, or a how-to, or one of those kind of books. So I just think this is going to be a really interesting conversation for people. So if you would just give everybody a little bit of a background about yourself and how you got interested in the dance world.
Well, I got really lucky. I came to New York after doing an English degree at the University of Virginia and loving stories all my life. I watched too much television, I read too many books, and to get to do that in college was really, really fun. And I moved to New York without a lot of skills. I had been a waitress and it's back in the day when you can sort of just show up with a liberal arts degree and get a job. And my first job was at the School of Visual Arts. So I learned a lot about art. And then I worked briefly for a theater consulting firm for a woman named Judith Dakin, who had worked at BAM. And when they made a change, she said, I'll help you get a job. And she had been Paul Taylor's first company manager. And she sent me down to meet Paul Taylor to do a fundraising job. And I was kind of lucky. I didn't really understand what a big opportunity it was. I had on
Mhm.
my little green suit and I went to his house at Van Dam Street and I met his dog, who was very overly affectionate and a little bit scary. And I got the job. And so it was really a dream for me. I'll never forget, my first time seeing the company was out at Brooklyn College, and they did Cloven Kingdom and Esplanade and another piece I can't remember. I'm embarrassed to say. But anyway, that just really started this amazing odyssey. And the company was pretty small then. There were 6 or 7 on the staff, and I did a little bit of everything, but mostly fundraising. So to be kind of a nobody from the turnip truck and to get to be that close to somebody who was really at the height of his powers. He made Company B when I was there. He made some other really important works. And while I was there, 2 of the 9 men that we had died of AIDS. And I was really young. And I had never really known anybody that died when they were really young. And AIDS was really new and scary and on the cover of Time magazine, but not, really the way you absorbed information was so different then. So we were all really deeply affected. And I got to work on a preservation project for the company. I got to help start Taylor too. So I really did have a 1 in a million kind of odyssey with them. And then I went on to do other things. I've worked at a museum. I worked for other dance companies, American Ballet Theater. I worked for Carol Armitage for a hot minute. I've worked with the Atlanta Ballet, the Nashville Ballet. So I was really a fundraiser, which is really a storytelling process. And I always wanted to write a book. And I thought that with this important subject of the way modern dance was, and the way you could literally go to work every week and find out about someone else who was gravely ill. I kept waiting for someone else to do it, right?
Mm.
A dancer, someone closer to the center of things, or a better writer or grown up or something. But it really stayed with me. And then during the pandemic, um, I read a lot. And I didn't really start writing until about 18 months ago, but I thought about how what happened when I was really young that changed the way we understood art, the way we experienced art, the way it was happening again for young
Mhm.
dancers and dance educators like you and all the college dance instructors that I've known. And I just thought, there were some really amazing similarities and also probably some telling differences that we haven't fully understood yet. And so I had gone back to work for Paul Taylor, for the company after Mr. Taylor died. And in November of 2024, I stopped because I wanted to take this on. I wanted to write the book.
You know, that is a wealth of information and so many things. No, that's wonderful because I have so many questions on top of the ones I have in front of me that have popped up when you're explaining all that. And I want to, I hope I can remember them all. The one of the first ones is, so as you were growing up, you did not have aspirations of entering the dance world. Is that correct?
So I took dance for a hot minute, actually,
Hmm.
at a tennis club in New Jersey.
Hmm.
I loved it, and, I had this really, probably 3 minutes of fame. A woman was doing her either master's or PhD at Rutgers, and she asked if I would be part of her evolution of a dancer, and
Oh.
before anybody really took as many
Who was that?
I
Do you
don't
remember who?
know, I don't
Oh, I was gonna say,
to
that's so
know.
funny because it's such a small world, the dance world, right?
6 or 7 years old, so maybe if she's listening, she will say, "I kinda remember that girl, she didn't really hold her stomach in." Um, but then we moved, and I
Mhm,
started studying dance, and I loved music, I loved art, I loved everything, but I would not say we were in any way a dance family
mhm.
or even an arts family like the family that I wrote about.
Yeah, and so, again, that's one of the things too, the art aspect of it, and art family, or the arts, the importance of arts in, as we talk about all the time as an educator, the importance of art in our lives. And I think you touch on that briefly when you talked about during the pandemic, you were seeing, the correlations between what it was like when you were working in New York City during the 90s, and then what was happening here to all of us during the pandemic. Can you talk about the similarities you
Yeah,
saw?
yeah. Well, it was so different because video and Zoom and all the things that we sort of took for granted during the pandemic as a way to make something happen, a way to have connection, obviously didn't exist back then.
Mhm,
And so we kept going to the theater. We kept
mhm,
seeing and people kept making work and maybe recasting or maybe
mhm,
re-choreographing or doing things. And because I was so new to it and I wasn't in the studio, right? I was like
mhm,
at a desk doing this and that. But people's partners were sick and dying, and audience
mhm,
members were sick and dying. I mean, I think one thing that we haven't talked enough about with AIDS is the way it affected a whole generation of audience goers. You used to go
That's interesting.
to the State Theater or to City Center,
Mhm.
there would be a lot of gay men there supporting dance and lifting
Yeah.
it up and celebrating it. And then so many of those people were lost and the reverberations happened. So when when COVID happened and the audiences were affected, right? You could
Mhm,
still go to the theater. That was so different. The way that we were at home together. I have a daughter that was in high school at the time.
mhm,
My husband is an architect. We were all working on Zoom and doing these weird things.
mhm,
So the isolation was much more broadly felt, right? It wasn't
mhm,
just happening to arts people, it was happening to
mhm,
all of humanity. So that was different, but the similarity, you know, is the fear, right?
yeah.
We're all afraid and we
Mhm,
all had different ways that we coped with the fear. Some people quarantined their mail and some people didn't. Some people
mhm,
practiced really safe sex and some people didn't. And some people were
mhm,
afraid to touch somebody who had AIDS and most of us weren't. And so I think the thing that we have to remember is that it's young people whose psyches are forming. And
yeah.
it's young people whose stories are being written. And so, I really hope that the book touches younger people and makes them curious about the
Mhm.
similarities. because they'll be much better at telling us what feels the same about COVID.
Yeah, yeah, the dancers who are in it. And, when you talk about too, what were you seeing, and I know you said you're at the desk, and I wanna talk about fundraising, I don't wanna forget to talk about that. But, what were you seeing dances that were being created during the '90s that were telling this story, the AIDS story, and how was choreography approached?
Right.
Was choreography approached differently? For
Yes.
instance, when we were during the pandemic, we either had to be, if we were doing it online, we had to be in our box,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or if we were in person, we had to be 6 feet apart. You couldn't touch, or you had to quarantine, test, blah, 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 in order to be connected and touch
Right.
and choreograph in that manner and dance together. How was dance and dances being created in the height of the AIDS epidemic? Were you aware of that or seeing that? If you even reflect back now, can you notice how that was played out in choreography?
I personally don't remember it as much. I do know that, and one thing that's really funny, and people have different levels of candor about this.
Mhm,
I don't know as much about modern dance, and particularly when you include ballet, as one might think that I would. I certainly know
mhm,
more than a lot of people that have never danced it, but I'm not really a dance historian. And part of that is because the way I experienced modern dance was that I worked for Taylor. And I
mhm,
might go and see Ailey, or I would go and see somebody young that was friends with people who were friends with people.
mhm,
I
yeah,
would go, to small places and see choreography, but I was super busy, you know what I mean?
yeah,
I was running
true, mhm,
my armpits and all these other things, and so
yeah,
it's a really good question, and there's
mhm,
someone a lot, more equipped to answer it than I am, but I will tell you that the younger choreographers, right, the people that wanted to leave a sort of big company, Taylor was
mhm,
considered a big company at the time, and do their own thing,
mhm,
they had lost friends firsthand, right? And they were
yeah,
sad, and they were affected, and they were
sure,
teenagers, and they were tough, and all these things. So, I mean, one thing that I think is really, here for the field, and why I did write a novel instead of trying to write a nonfiction book, is that because documentation was very much harder, right?
mhm,
You didn't go see somebody's concert and hold up your phone. A lot of
yeah,
these things happened one time, and
mm,
they might have the videos, but, like, I don't have the videos. So, I think that's I hope you and I get to talk about it, because one of the things is that technology back then I remember one time we were talking about this preservation project that we have been funded by the NEA. And, Paul Taylor was on the one hand incredibly grateful and gracious about it. On the other hand, he's like, I don't know. I mean, nothing looks as good on video as it does in real life. I mean, you really don't want people looking at these things, do you? And I was like, I don't know. And so I think one thing that was really happening during COVID is this technology that was not really necessary. It was documenting whatever
mhm,
was happening, but during the pandemic this time, it was everything, right? It
yeah,
was the way you and I would make friends, the
yes,
way you
yeah,
would talk to your mom in the nursing home, it was the way you would make a dance, and people
mhm,
did, and they were beautiful and so depressing to me.
mhm,
I mean, I
mhm,
just found it soul crushing. But the other thing that we did do during the pandemic is talk about dance a lot.
mhm,
No,
yeah,
and, you came alive during this time,
mhm,
all these other things, and so that's actually a part of the hangover that's really good, because
yeah.
talking about it, to my mind, is the storytelling, and the video is only the documentation, it's not a substitute, you know?
I like that. I like how you say that, talking about it as a storytelling, and the video is the documentation of it. Because you're right, even with modern technology and the different angles, and even implementing, there are some wonderful artists out there. I've had a few on the podcast
Absolutely.
who implement different media forms
Great.
into their choreography, and it's so cool to use that in addition to,
Yes.
but in place of,
Great.
is different and can be flat, very one dimensional. And it
Hey, sorry to interrupt you. That's what
no,
was
it's okay.
about TikTok and everybody feeling like they're experiencing dance on their phone, because if you can curate whatever you wanna watch for however long you wanna watch it, whenever you wanna watch it, that's a great gift. On the other hand, you used to go see a mixed bill, and there might be a piece that you really didn't like, but you were affected by it and
Yes.
experienced it. Now, if you get to something you don't like, you're like, "Oh, it's not my thing." And again, I'm not saying one is better than the other, it's just that I grew up the other way,
Yeah.
and I
And
think it had really great gifts that people can continue to learn from.
yeah, and and I've also talked about this on the podcast as well too. Being in the audience with other people, it there's that energy that affects, and it's part of the whole experience,
Right.
whether it's ballet, modern, whatever kind
Absolutely.
of dance you're watching. And when you are watching it on video, you can pause it, turn it off,
No.
switch, fast forward to the part you like, replay the part, do all kinds of those types of things. So it takes you out. It almost becomes, for lack of a better word, voyeuristic, as opposed to experiential,
Yes.
and dance is so much that, not only for the audience, but for the
Yeah.
dancer. I speak as a dancer, you're
Right.
experiencing,
For
yeah,
sure.
so much on stage
Mhm.
during rehearsal, with your partner, without your partner, in your group, your small group, your trio, your duo, whatever it is. And then as well, when it's live with that audience,
Yes.
it's so you are fed
Yes.
by the audience.
Right, it's a communion.
It is, and a communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a definitely a communication. It's funny, it brings me to, I'm gonna hold up this book. So for those of you that are listening only on audio, I'm holding up this really unique cover of Lucie's book called Never Ready. And I have to say, I noticed right away when I got the book, the Laban notation on it. And I didn't even flip it over, and I didn't see that it was credited at first. I just thought, how interesting to choose dance notation for the cover. And, because like you said, we didn't have video. I am by no means a Laban specialist. I've taken some Laban courses in my, in my studies, like one or two, and I thought it was intriguing, because all dancers, I think, or choreographers will attest to the fact that we have our little stick figures that we like to draw when we are trying to write down and explain our choreography when we're at rehearsal. I know I do. I have these funny little stick figures that I make,
Right.
but the cover of the book actually has some Laban notation, and it's cited here courtesy of the Paul Taylor Dance Foundation. I don't know what it's of. I don't know what dance or dance is.
Yeah.
It's depicting. I don't know if you do. Are
Great
you?
story. I do know, and I feel so fortunate. One of the great things about doing this project myself without the prestige and help of a publisher is that I also got to be the art director. And I met a woman named Marlon Beanstra, who is a very gifted designer, and she did a very deep dive, and she gave me a lot of choices. But she found lab notation in sort of doing her research and studying Paul Taylor. She's not a dance person, um, and she and I agree that it's so beautiful,
Mhm.
and it is a tribute to like pre video times, but it's like a code,
Mhm. It's like hieroglyphics. It's like hieroglyphics.
very much
Yeah.
like hieroglyphics, which I'm also a big
Mhm.
fan of because I love Egyptian art. And it's also, sort of a symbol for being on the outside of something. Like even most dancers don't read it, right?
Mhm.
The secret code. And what
Yeah.
Harry is always trying to do is to learn the steps and to
Mhm.
understand the things in this culture, in this company that everybody seems to already know.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it was really a great discovery, and I was so grateful to the Taylor Company. And that is actually a section from Oriole, which was, Paul
Okay.
Taylor's breakthrough dance. So it's very, very special to me. And
Yeah.
the figures on there are by my favorite designer, Parrish
Mhm.
Andre, who's my daughter. And
Oh, look at them holding it up again.
yeah, it's really special.
Mhm. And what a gift to be able to use that from Paul Taylor on your your cover, I mean, that speaks a lot to who you are and what you were to the company or are
I hope
to the
so.
company. Yeah, I would have to say, I mean, and I don't know that. I'm just saying, like, they don't just hand out, here, you
Yeah.
can use
No,
this,
they don't. They don't.
just go back for a minute about fundraising and because I think that's an important part for people. I've spoken again about this, funding for the arts and fundraising and all that type of thing. What does a fundraiser do? And just talk a little bit about that for listeners.
It is a lovely way to make a living. I feel very fortunate that I got to do it. I learned from some of the best in the business, but really fundraising is storytelling. It's you ask a donor to listen a little bit to the story of your organization and their mission and their aspirations, and you sort of see where the story intersects with the donor story. And
Mhm,
so it can be more of a participation thing where you're just giving, more modest gifts. It can turn into really a force for a philanthropist and their family for being who they want to be in the world. And, you know, wherever I've worked, but particularly in dance, people are it's a lifestyle,
mhm,
it's where a fan, might feel sometimes like a family member or like even a fanatic. And so that relationship that happens through patronage, it's
mhm,
as old as the Renaissance. There are great patrons supporting, terrific painters or architects or musicians. It's alive and well, and it is the lifeblood of these companies. So when we talk about, the audience is important, the donor is important, the obviously the dancers and the artists are in some ways the most important, but it's also the staff that is the glue, right? It is
mhm.
the company manager that makes sure that everybody's on the bus. It is the production person that makes sure that the lighting designer's vision is realized. So I really think that staff at all kinds of organizations are they're very special people. You
Mhm.
really are behind the scenes. I mean, I shouldn't say that because I'm one, but you really
Mhm.
are behind the scenes and you really are um giving everything you've got to see that show look the way it can look. And for people to understand the really unique ecosystem that they're a part
Mhm.
of. And
Yeah.
I'm not really raising any money right now. I do actually kind of miss it, but it is
Mhm.
also, something I did for decades, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to leave it to the next generation. But especially for people that have danced and want to do something, for a third act, it's just a beautiful cycle to be a part of.
Yeah, and I just want to add a little bit about that too, is that, listeners who perhaps are wondering, why is there fundraising or why, when you get the mailings and the
Yeah.
mailings are so important and the phone calls, as sometimes as you're like, oh gosh, they're calling during dinner again, you know, or oh my God, I told them to call and I forgot they were calling. I've done that, you know, and, but it's important because like you say, it is as old as could be, and the reason behind it is there it the donors or the patrons, as far back as, way, way back, is that, you were giving the space to an artist so they could create, so they could do what they were best at,
Yes.
which was create. And
Yes.
they were creating art for an audience. And you needed to have somebody, and all those things do cost money. And so, excuse me, you are needing to give that space when an artist, is trying to raise money and create and you're pulled in so many different directions and usually the work then suffers, the piece that final product suffers. And so that's my little pitch to
Wait,
to
and
fundraising support.
I'm glad you did it. I should be doing it too. It's funny in the story, I don't really dwell on it. Like there's a scene with an open rehearsal where Henry first gets to see Mark Carpenter's choreography and she is really blown away and sort of can't really deal with how big it feels to her. And then there's, I hope, like an amusing scene where I kind of poke fun at the gala system, because organizations have to have a big party. And I think part of the reason that I didn't spend much time on it, and Renee, who is the development director, gets sort of short shrift in some ways, Is it because I do really respect it? I just sort of stayed away from it, which
Mhm.
seems ironic. It seems like the opposite of what it would be. But I really wanted I really wanted my dance family to see that I was paying attention to what the most important thing was. And I really wanted my philanthropy colleagues to understand that, like, we know. You know what I mean? We know
Yeah.
what the important thing is. But yeah, I don't spend that much time on fundraising in the story.
Yeah, and that's okay, and that's why we talk about those things here, and one other thing I just wanna add too is that, that the importance of it, and that and for, those who do the fundraising, if those people, it's okay to ask, you 'cause sometimes like, "Oh god, I don't wanna ask for money." You know what? It really is okay, to ask. You need the money,
An
right?
invitation. It's an invitation
Yeah, it's an invitation.
to
Yes.
participate. And once you're invested,
Mhm.
it enriches your life in a different way. It just
Yes.
does. And so
Yeah.
I loved asking people for money, but I got to work for really great organizations that I
Mhm,
really, really believed in.
mhm.
And so I think that anybody that's asking for money, you gotta really believe.
Yeah.
And anybody that's being asked just needs to understand that it's just an invitation.
It's just an invitation, exactly, and ticket sales are never cover the budget,
Yeah.
the operating budget of an organization. Just let me tell everyone
Yeah.
that. Just like it, and, it just doesn't, and there's just and it just doesn't. So, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
I'm with you.
Yeah, yeah. So, I read, I don't remember where it was. I don't know if it was on your website or some of the notes that I had, but you said that you call this your Declaration of Independence. And I want to know why writing this book, Never Ready, it's called Never Ready, everybody. It's a novel, is called your Declaration of Independence.
Well, thank you. It's so timely, right? Because we're gonna
Hmm.
celebrate the 4th of July at the end of the week. You know, as much as I am sincere when I say how much I enjoyed being the backstop and being behind the scenes, um, there was a time for me where I needed to make my own statement, and be the artist instead of being the backup person, and
Hmm.
be the writer and stop saying, "Well, I don't know if I can, maybe somebody could do it better." I needed to just do it.
Hmm.
And I think that so many of us, at all stages of our life, but particularly when you start to, let's say, be older than you ever thought you'd feel or be, you know, time is running out. And you can't really continue to say, I'm not ready, or I'll wait until this happens or that happens. Or so, I think that most of us are not really ready, and yet we've sort of always been ready.
Hmm.
And so it was hard to leave Paul Taylor. I love those guys. I loved them when I worked as a young person, and especially getting to know, an important figure like Paul Taylor. And then I loved helping them make that very difficult transition. I have a lot of faith in Michael Novak and, of course, in all the dancers and in John Thomas.
Hmm.
But it was time. It was time for
Yeah.
me
Time.
to do my thing.
Yeah.
And it was really hard and really
Yeah.
fun too. And
Yeah.
so, thank you for asking. I also had some people in my life that were like, "You should get an agent and you can do it and you're not being patient enough." But the truth is, I didn't really want to compromise.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, self-publishing or independent publishing or whatever you call it, it still has a certain stigma, whereas an independent movie or an indie band or, some
Mhm.
other things, have a little more cachet. And I just felt like, why would I wait to get an agent and then hope to get published? Why don't I just do it? And I had a great editor named Allison Kerr Miller Kerr, and, Marlon, and so, like, I had my own
Mhm.
team, and I had so much fun, and I appreciate that you like the way it looks. We worked really hard to
Yeah.
make it professional and beautiful. You can't really write a book like I set out to write that's really about beauty and the
Yes.
beauty to bind us together and have a sort of homemade looking book. So, I really enjoyed the process, and I'm gonna write another one.
That's exciting. Are you already in the works of writing another one?
Well, some of what we could talk about it or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Another world that I know well is, the museum world, and
Oh,
so
okay.
I have a pretty big idea to try to explore that.
That's exciting, but back to Never Ready. I'm holding it up again. Don't
Thank
you
you
like
so
my little plugs? Never Ready, everybody. It's really a beautiful cover. Yeah, I just love that explanation of, why you wrote it. I have to point out for you that that is very artist of you. That is so you have it in you. You are an artist through and through to say, like, you know what? I have to be in control of I don't mean you're controlling. I mean, like,
no, but
just you have to be in control of the artistic, how it's gonna play out. And so artistic of you. And
you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And self-publishing, hey, you want to get something done, you gotta do it yourself sometimes.
Thank
You just have to. I wrote a book and did the self-publishing thing, and it went to number 2 on Amazon. So you just never know.
never know.
You just never know. So let's talk about the book a little bit. How much of your real self is in here?
Okay,
And is the protagonist
yeah.
you?
I know I tried to prep for this question because it is sort of a blurry line, right?
Mhm,
I was not 17 when I moved to New York. I do not have a French grandmother. In all kinds of, ostensible ways, it's not me. It's not anyone I know.
mhm,
At the same time, she provided me this window to explore things that I know really well, right? I know what it feels to be on the outside. I know what it feels to feel anxious. I know what it feels to be furious with my family. And so I think that most writers, and again, this is my first book, so I'm trying to accelerate my progress. I think that some people really can just imagine a whole other world and,
mhm,
they have their own language and their own
mm,
speech creatures and all this stuff. I'm definitely writing something that I know.
mhm,
I loved talking about the architecture and design part of it and the, references to furniture and other popular culture because that's part of my family culture. We love beautiful things, and in some ways, it's really bound our family together, and, in other ways, it's probably made us too picky, and so,
mhm,
nobody in the story is real,
mhm.
but almost everybody has attributes that I learned about from somebody else
Of
that
course.
I wanted to portray. Is that
Yeah. Yeah, no, makes total sense. It's writing, you pull from your real life, especially fiction. You have to pull from your real life. Like that's like writing 101 in
Yes.
school, right? You have to pull
I
from
didn't
your own.
actually except for, the New Year's party, I did actually
Mhm.
help throw that New Year's party, but
Oh, very
everything else
good.
is complete fabrication.
Wow. Okay, that's really great. And what made you like what made you create the character? Like what made you pick that character to create?
Yeah.
Let's back before you answer that. Why don't you, without giving, any spoiler alerts, why don't you just give a brief synopsis
Oh, that's
of the
great.
book?
I'm practicing this too. So Henry Drake is 17 years old and she's precocious and funny and does well in school, but she's a bit of an outsider and her mother is really the only person that understands. And Helene is a very charismatic, high-strung suburban mom, and she very much wants Henry to just hurry up and get through the pain of high school so that she can escape to college because she really understands Henry and knows that everything's going to be fine. But one morning, Helene is looking out the window, her bags are packed, and Maymay, the French grandmother, is saying she's heading to Switzerland, she needs a rest. And so Henry's mother has had, what we used to call a nervous breakdown.
Oh, that's
And
yeah.
right, nobody says nervous breakdown anymore. And it's kind of the Wizard of Oz storm, right? So she leaves, and then Henry's supposed to do senior year with her dad, who she loves, but it's never going to work. So Henry screws up her courage and says, I'm not doing senior year without mom. And the dad really surprises her and says, I think that's a good idea. Maybe you should move to New York and live with Carmen.
Mhm.
And Carmen is this half sister that Henry has never really known. She's only met 2 or 3 times. And Carmen works at the Mark Carpenter Dance Company. So Henry
Okay.
goes and answers the phone. She's um, learning all the time. She's learning how a nonprofit works, but she's also learning that that this virus is shaping the way the company is going to continue.
Mhm.
And so it's a true coming of age story. She learns a lot, and, it's a hero's journey. She does go home changed.
Mhm. And then, there's one point, I think it was chapter 10. It was the very beginning of chapter 10 where you said the desk was the center of the studio. I love that because it brought me back to my own
Oh,
dance
yeah.
studio. And I'm like, of course, oh my gosh, the desk. I was like, yes, the desk is. You don't realize because you talk about, you talk about there how the person sitting at the desk, is hearing everything. And people just talk, like, and they don't filter, they don't sit, they do not, as if you're not even there. It still happens.
I'm so glad that that resonated for you.
It did because I thought, oh my gosh, it's so true.
And if you
Yes.
really knew that, like, most of us would never take the job. You know what I mean? We'd be too terrified because,
Yeah.
these really are otherworldly people. These are
Hmm.
people that are superheroes, and then they just have to order their lunch,
Yeah.
for the lunch to be delivered like everybody else.
Yeah, and it's funny, and it really did, and I just it was, like you described it, dancers would come out there and they'd be stretching or having snacks, blah, 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 and there you are, or I'm pretending, how I'm thinking in my studio, and there you'd be just, typing away, pretending you're not listening to anything, or being like caught a deer caught in the headlights, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be hearing this,
Right.
and you can't say anything, like your lips are sealed, like
Yeah.
that, and I think that says a lot too to the person in that role, and now I'm going to talk to those people who have that role out there in the dance world. That is an important role, and as a former dance owner, a dance studio owner, and someone who did hire for that role, hired somebody, you needed to have somebody who, that protected um people's business,
Yes. Oh,
and you had to know how to navigate it and to be like, okay, and enough of that now. We need to redirect the conversation. So that's a very real thing. And it is because dancers too, you're in a studio room, you're dancing, you're performing, you're working on a piece, not talking.
right.
Naturally, you're gonna come out to the space that you could just blah,
Yeah.
let it out, and not even most of the time, it's not even meant anyway. You're just having to get it out of you verbally because you've just expended so much energy physically. So I just thought that was a very
I'm so
interesting.
glad you like that part,
Mm.
and one thing that I hope people that aren't dancers or dance people take away is what nice, intelligent people dancers are.
Yes.
How they you imagine this caste system where, the art is here and the staff is here and the production is somewhere in between and this, that, and the other, but it never felt that way to me. I don't know if
Mhm.
every company is like that, but I would say, I rattled off a few other companies that I work for, and what happens is you just start to learn that these people that are so incredibly gifted, physically, it comes from an emotional intelligence. It comes from feeling things. It comes from wanting to communicate. So I mean, they are athletes, but so much more, right? And
Mhm.
so I hope that people, I mean, of course, I want dance people to think that it feels authentic, but I also hope that it transmits and that people who just see them on the stage, and wonder that they look inside and see, oh, there's really something so, magical's an overused word, but there is something very magical that's happening for the dancer, just being in the world and being in the studio and being on the stage, right? Like these are
Yeah.
really deeply feeling people
Yes.
who love very deeply, and they're really grateful and gracious,
Yes, yes, and I think you hit it on the head too. Love very deeply. It's very true. Love, and it doesn't mean relationship love. Love,
Yes.
love. Just it's like that. What is it? Agape love. Is that what we want to
Yes, yes,
say? Really.
yes,
It resonates so deep. Artists. It resonates so deep. That's why there are artists because we put that kind of love out into, at least that's the job of an artist, to put that out into the world, to
yes,
communicate, to give people that sense of hope and that sense of love. and we do feel so incredibly deeply. You can be in a studio rehearsing, and dancers have like those spidey senses.
Yeah.
Because you're aware, you have to be aware of so many people around you on stage.
Yeah.
This is what I attribute it to. I don't know if when I was a young dancer I would have thought that's why, but now, having so many years behind me, I think it's because you have to be aware of what's in front of you, beside you, diagonal of you, back of you. You have to have all those senses working underneath you,
Yeah.
that somebody can, somebody who's not in what's happening can walk into the room and the whole energy shifts. And you feel it. A dancer feels that shift. So you're aware of something changing in the room. It just brings to mind, still stuck on that, the person at the desk, it brings to mind, I had, I would have parents who, especially with the older kids, they dropped their kids off. They wouldn't wait, which was fine. That was totally fine. They were
Yes.
old enough to be there by themselves. And, some parents would hang back and wait, and they'd be doing their own work or what have you. And there was one particular parent who always was in the waiting room, and I knew they were always there, but I personally never wanted to disturb them. They always looked very involved in whatever they were working on. And I was in the room teaching, like I was teaching and doing whatever I needed to do. But the minute they would walk in, I would feel like that energy shift. And I remember the one day the kids went on a break, had a bathroom break, and I went to go get some water. And as I walked past them, I greeted them. And they're like, "Oh, Miss Joanne, I didn't even think you ever realized I was here. I was trying to be so quiet." And I was like, "Oh, no, I've known you've been here." So I just point out that, the spidey senses, they're always active, you know?
Right, and I think emotionally, it's hard to write. I hope that, I got some of it correct. It was hard to write. It was hard to write.
Mhm,
But I think the thing is that at least like taking a swing at some of these things is good for dance. It's good for everybody that loves dance because, right now people are doing other things. They're watching
mhm,
Netflix and they're doing this and they're doing that. I think they still want their kids to learn to dance, but a little bit less maybe showing up at the
mhm,
theater and it's expensive and all the things. And so I think what you were saying about the energy and the audience too,
mhm.
right? And that communion that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah,
I want to celebrate that and I want other generations of parents and dancers to know that, you don't have to make it and be in a company, right? Those jobs
mhm,
are very hard to get and keep, but that this will be the way you are in the world.
yeah,
This is be the way that you are in the world, and that's deep love and this understanding of where people are either
yeah,
physically or emotionally, all those things. That's a really terrific way to be in the world, and we really need that kind of love, you know,
yeah.
very
It's
badly right now.
it's true, it's true. Can you talk about what your process was for writing this? Because I believe I also read somewhere that you wrote like 1,000 words a day
I did, and I
or thereabouts.
think that's like a way that apparently a lot of people write it. I really put myself on a deadline. That kinda goes back to my fundraising
Mhm.
background where you had to get a grant in or you had to get a letter
Yeah.
to somebody. Um, but I had a teacher, her name is Lauren Grodstein, and she is a very successful novelist. And she was gonna let me go do a workshop with her, but
Oh,
your book had to be finished. Your first draft had to be,
I see.
and I a little bit exaggerated how far along I was because I
Mhm,
really started. I had notebooks and scenes,
mhm.
all these things, but I hadn't really started, and I had to have it to her by April to go in this workshop in June. And because I'm just disciplined, and like I said, I love a deadline. I just would wake up and write 1,000 words a day, and I did it. I missed a few days, but I did it most days for 89 days, and
Wow.
it was a little long, and you trimmed it down. But I'm curious to see if I can do it again because
Yeah, right?
thinking about this story
Yeah.
for a long, long time, and the other
Mhm,
story is, a little more remote in my mind, but, I think, it's funny, one time I, had the opportunity to work with Linda Denise Fisher Harrell, who's the artistic director at, Hubbard Street,
mhm.
and I was raising money at Towson University, which has a great dance program, and we did this presentation for some donors, and all the disciplines were represented, but she was the best. And I said, "Oh my God, thank you so much. You were so great, blah, blah, blah." And she goes, "I rehearsed. That's what we do. We rehearse."
Ah,
And, I rehearsed a little bit every day to get ready for this because it was kind of like a
yeah.
talkie thing. And I thought about her. I thought about all the dancers that I've known that get up and take class at 10 o'clock. And, going to a job, it's no picnic either. But I really did. I thought about them. I thought about the discipline of going to class every day, whether you feel like it or not.
Mhm.
And so I didn't really phone it in. I
Yeah.
really worked very hard at it, and it was really fun, really fun.
Yeah.
People talk about how lonely it is and all this stuff, but I don't know if it was a nostalgia trip or if, like I said, I was just so glad to finally get to do this thing that I
Mhm.
do, and I have to thank my husband who backed me up 1,000%. But, it was fun, and
Yeah.
I sort of understood, you know, even when it was hard to get started. I also listened to the same music every time.
Ah, okay. I
Um,
heard that's a good trick. Well, not trick, but
it
a good way to get you to write. It
is. Listen
triggers that it's writing time.
I listened to, Brian Eno's Spotify radio station or something,
Mhm.
and I heard some of the same songs every day, and I think that that also must have been my wanting to be like a dancer somehow, right? Because
Mhm.
I just thought, if I keep hearing the same music, I'm gonna go to the same place in my brain.
Mhm.
And, that was fun. It was fun. The editing was, hard and long, and like I said,
Yeah.
we had great help, and, yeah, there were a lot of steps to it, but it was like the journey that I've been waiting to take.
Yes, which is really exciting. And how about did you handwrite it out or type it out when you were
Oh, I
writing?
typed it out. I typed it.
Because I have to tell you, do you know when I did my book, I hand wrote it and then typed it into the yes.
Well, you probably wrote it twice, and you probably edited it as you wrote, so I think a lot of rather famous writers do handwrite, but, I guess just because, at
It was
work, I
faster for me. It was faster.
sure, wow.
Yeah, but at times sloppy. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but sloppy because then I couldn't understand what I wrote. I was like, "What did I write here?
Right,
What
right,
did
right,
I mean?" You
right.
know? But yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it was it's fun.
yeah. I just wrote and did the same thing with the music. And that was yeah, that was great. Um, Now, do you have without giving it away? Do you have a favorite part of the book?
Oh, that's such a nice question. I did really kinda love those people, and so I liked a lot of parts. I liked there's a conversation where Mark Carpenter kind of wants Henry to make something, and it's a
Mhm,
very brief scene. It's just a tiny conversation about, not being a critic, but being a maker.
mhm,
And so there were some scenes that I liked more, like there's a little bit of romance and,
mhm,
one part that was fun to write. And um, there's a really tender scene with the dad, where Henry, I think I mentioned that she went to this open rehearsal. She saw Mark's signature piece, and then she goes to lunch with her dad, who is like trying to stay out of her business, and 17-year-old that's living with his half daughter that he only found out about recently. And so he's a very cool dad, and he's kind of given short shrift in his family, but he's actually one of the real heroes of the book. And so I did enjoy writing, about Henry telling her dad. He's like, "Tell me, what is it like?"
mhm.
And she tries to describe the dance. And so that did two things for me. One, um, like I said, I really think that talking about what we used to see was so, so important. And you used to like really work at it to really describe like this happened and then I can't remember what
Yeah,
happened next, but then this happened. And the person's like, yeah, yeah. And then the person has a
yes,
question. You're like, wait, I'm going to get to that. And so that kind of like bonding, that's like how we made our friends, right?
yeah.
And then the person would either run out and buy a ticket or be like, forget it. I'm never going to make it. And so that was fun to write and hopefully fun to do. But I also, my dad is, 89 years old.
Oh,
And I read that section to him and he liked it. And so that was
oh,
fun. So
that's nice. Yeah, that's really nice. I can't give it away, but I like the letter. That's all I'm gonna say. The
okay,
letter.
good.
Yeah, there's a letter in here that I found quite poignant.
I'm glad. I'm
Yeah, I thought that was I know it's hard to talk about a book. You don't want to give it away
I know
to
we're
any
figuring it out though.
excuse me?
We're figuring it out, like how to talk about
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want to give it away, at all. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. It's just how about, the title Never Ready?
Well,
Never
I
Ready.
think that, so I was a coach for a little while after
Mhm.
I sort of got tired of shaking people down for
What
money.
kind of coach? What do you what
Um, so I called myself a personal and professional coach.
Oh,
I was
uh-huh.
training, in this school of coaching that Thomas Leonard founded,
Oh,
and, so in coaching, you're always so I call myself a personal and professional coach, and I hope you
mhm.
get back to that because it was really
Fulfilling, I imagine.
I didn't really help anybody get to the
Oh.
C-suite, and I didn't really, like, use crystals, but somewhere in
Mhm, yeah.
between, I would help mostly women, sometimes nonprofit people, but
Mhm,
sometimes, should I go to graduate school or should I go back to work or things like
mhm,
that. Um, I felt like everybody is trying to figure out not only what they wanna do, but when they're gonna be ready to do it,
mhm.
you know?
Mm,
And most of us, especially if we're mothers or have a lot of family obligation, we love to put it off and
mhm,
make it about something else. So part of it was about me,
mhm,
getting ready. But I also think that when you're an adolescent and a young adult, you want so much to be the most capable person in the room.
mhm,
And you keep walking into the room and you're the person that doesn't know anything.
mhm,
And so you wonder, when am I going to be ready? And one minute, and the next minute you're like, I'm ready, get out of.
mhm,
So I think readiness is like a funny underexplored theme. Like what makes you ready and how do you get out of your own way and how do you give it a whirl, right? How does anybody
yeah,
know when they're ready to stop dancing? How does anybody know when they're ready to take
yeah,
painting? How does anyone know when they're ready to start a family, start a business?
mhm,
I'm into readiness in a big way.
yeah. See, that's good, but it's never ready. Yeah, no, I think that's great. Where can, listeners get this
I
book?
would be so grateful if they would get this book. So you really can buy it anywhere you buy books. So if you
Mhm,
like to support your local bookstore, I support your support of that. And just walk into a bookstore and say, "This book is on Ingram Spark." They probably aren't carrying it, but they will order it for you.
okay.
Go
So,
to
most& bookstores will co like, you could walk into a Barnes& and Noble and they'll order it for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I hope.
Okay.
It's happened. A few people have
Uh-huh.
told me.
Oh, great.
There's always Amazon, which,
Mhm,
I have some issues with, but it does help my algorithm, and I'm
mhm,
grateful for anybody that leaves a review.
mhm,
But I also have my own website, my own store at
mhm,
neverready.net, and if you buy from me, then I'll inscribe it and
mhm.
do a little special gift. And so what I tried to do is just make it so that everybody could do it their way. Like, I'm just grateful. You ask somebody to look at a painting you've done, it takes, maybe a couple of minutes. Maybe to see a dance, you're asking for 2 hours. Asking someone to read a book, that's a
Book.
big ask. So I'm
Yeah.
really grateful when anybody says they're going to read it.
Yeah, and it's let's see, it's 322 pages.
Yeah.
That's great, and you wrote it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Just you
Oh,
turned
another
it.
way that people could read it is, I really want it to be in libraries. Like, I don't know if you've gotten this far, but
Mhm.
the librarian is really an important pivotal friend
Yeah.
to Henry. She walks down 10th Street to the beautiful library, on 6th Avenue, and, I really want it to be free. So the next thing I'm gonna do is work on the ebook so
Oh,
that
great.
read it on their reader
Yep,
and,
yep.
get it into libraries because I
That's
prefer it
good.
to be free. I'm
And
obs
there's lots of, summer reading and summer book clubs.
Yes.
There is this thing. Wait, I'm gonna call it the wrong thing. Secret book club. Secret. Have you heard of that?
Told me about that. I wanna see if I can figure that out.
Me too. So, if any listeners like know about Secret Book Club, let us know because I came across it and it's like traditional book clubs. You get together, you pick the book, you read the book, you talk about it. I could never be a part of a traditional book club. I don't think because I'm a very slow reader.
Yeah.
And I would be like, "Oh gosh," Um, but the secret book club, from what I understand, is still people can a whole bunch of people who love to read,
Yeah.
and they join this one particular book club that's in their area.
Right.
And you read whatever book you want to read, and you have meeting times, and you meet, like, say it's at a cafe or a park in the nice weather, what have you, or, wherever you're meeting, and everybody sits around and reads their book.
Right.
And
Right.
you're not like you're not interacting and saying like, "Oh, so what did you think of, da 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 on page da 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 when she said this?" You're reading your own book, but you're getting together with a group to
Yes.
come together to read. And then on occasion, depending on the secret book club, I don't know if there's any in New York. I'm not sure. I know there's some down in Baltimore because I keep saying I'm going to go to the secret book club.
Right, right, right.
Um, you know, but then, some of them will have like little, you might stay for a coffee or tea afterwards or beforehand, or, they might have a little picnic, so it's a good secret book club read.
It would be, and the other thing I'll say about book clubs is if anybody listening will get their book club to read it, I would love to do a Zoom with you
Yes.
because talking about the book is as important as the book itself, if you ask me, because I wanna hear, Never Ready is a family story, it's a found family story, it's an art story, it's an anxiety story, it's coming of age.
Yeah.
So for me, I really wanna hear from people, and I don't have to talk too much. I just wanna hear what other people
Well,
say.
I think I should put this out here right now. So, listeners, if you want to have a little book club for Never Ready, you contact us because maybe we can set that up and have like a little, wouldn't that be fun?
That'd be
We
so
could have a little, reading of the Never Ready book club. And that would kind of be fun.
well, it would be a
So,
blast. It was
wouldn't that be, that would be, I'd have fun too because I'd be held accountable for reading.
well, I'll tell you, it's a journey that we all need to keep having. It's good for your brain,
Yes, it is.
and it's really good to use your imagination.
Yeah, it is.
Mm,
Yes. Oh
imagine
my goodness, to read it and imagine it happening in your head, right?
and then talk
So, yes, so important, so important. So, Lucy, this is very exciting. I'm excited for you. Have any of the Paul Taylor Company members read this or the
Yeah, some of
yeah.
my absolute, favorite dancers and favorite people have given me really terrific feedback, including Denise Roberts Hurlin, who is the founder of Dancers Responding to AIDS,
Mhm.
was
That's
super
awesome.
important to me, that she at least know what I'm doing, and,
Yeah.
I never wanted to think that I was taking anybody else's story. And so her organization is done so much. It's raised millions and millions of dollars, but it's also raised awareness and it's held this community around AIDS together. So she's one that's been very supportive and positive, and quite a few, not quite a few others. They know who they are.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything, before we wrap it up? I can't believe this hour has gone so
I
quickly.
can't thank you enough.
Absolutely. Is there anything I keep holding the book up, holding
Thank
it
you
up?
for holding the book up and
Absolutely. Yeah.
having me. And
Uh,
if anybody just wants to check out my website, it is neverready.net, not .com.
mhm.
Um, I'd love to hear from you. And I'm so grateful that we got to talk about it. You're so terrific and you're doing
Yes.
so much for dance
Thank
and so
you.
much for everybody that's trying to coalesce, around beautiful things. So I
Yeah.
really, really appreciate being here. It was so fun.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. Thank you. Go get this book, Never Ready by Lucie André, next best-selling author. And then join the book club so we can read it together. I know some of you listening will do that. So
Oh,
contact me so that we could do that. How fun would that be? But really, thank you everybody for listening. This is Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you, everybody.
Powered by Riverside.